Hey everyone, Simon here from Eclipse Fi, and in this video we are going to be talking about RWAs. RWA stands for real world assets, and this is basically the tokenization of assets from traditional world or the real world onto the blockchain. Obviously in blockchain and crypto you have crypto native assets, Ethereum, Bitcoin, it could be layer 1 assets, it could be tokens for protocols, stable coins. But real world assets brings in, I guess, a whole different flavor to the blockchain world. So things such as real estate might be assets that have their own cash flows in the traditional space, gold, commodities, stocks, bonds, like there's a whole range of different assets that can actually be tokenized and brought onto the blockchain in a digital way. In this video, we're going to explore a little bit of, what are some of the benefits of RWAs? How is this going to actually change the blockchain space, but also change the asset space in traditional finance. We recently recorded a AMA/podcast with the KiiChain team that you can find on our Twitter, but also in the YouTube. That one is really good video to go and watch if you want to delve deeper into this. We talked a lot about RWAs. We talked a lot about the benefits of RWAs and how they support emerging markets. Since the KiiChain team is focusing a lot on the RWA space and how it actually will bring a lot of benefits to people in some of these emerging markets, as well as companies that are looking to do cross-border trade. So let's delve into it. My personal take on RWAs that really excites me is the ability to bring more assets on chain that generate cash flows. So one of the challenges I think with DeFi for a long time, and Vitalik has talked about the whole nature of Ouroboros, which is a snake biting its own tail, is that there's very few assets that generate real cash in the crypto space. You've got things like funding rates coming from SEXs, trading fees, interest from money markets, fees for leverage such as perps, and gas fees as well. But besides from these, there's very strong cash flow generating assets in the space. And a lot of the time we've been reliant on assets that, are inflationary or might not hold their value very well outside of a couple blue chips. Because of this, it's meant that the whole of the decentralized finance, which is meant to recreate a whole new financial industry, has been built on assets that might not be high quality or as high quality. They don't generate as much cash, as much yield, and it makes it really hard to create this new financial system, which is all about generating yield and making assets productive. What will happen with the emergence of RWAs will mean that there are more assets on chain that generate cash flows and yield, and it means that these Lego blocks of the financial system in DeFi will mean that there's a lot more avenues for yields and strategies, and it's really going to help to propel this adoption of DeFi and bring DeFi into kind of its next chapter, which will be a hybrid, I think, between crypto assets and real world assets intertwined in DeFi. As more DeFi primitives such as options and other protocols come into light, it's going to make for some really cool things. Also, I think this came and emerged a lot from the KiiChain space, is RWAs are going to have a lot of benefits for accessibility of assets, accessibility and liquidity. So accessibility of some of these assets might not matter as much to someone who wants to buy Apple stock in the US, who can set up a brokerage account and do that pretty easily. But for someone in Colombia or in emerging markets that don't have access to these assets really easily, it means that cross-border people will be able to have access to Nvidia and Apple and Tesla much easier than they, when they haven't been able to do so in the past. And this can go for a whole range of different assets such as real estate as well. If you could take a house and you could tokenize it and you could put it on the blockchain, and meaning that someone in a foreign country can access it easily without jumping through a lot of hoops, then it's going to really change the game a lot. On top of that, enables for the fractionalization of some assets. So, a stock might be $1,000 per stock, and that might be hard for someone, when that has, doesn't have a lot of money in emerging countries to buy a whole entire share. Whereas with the fractionalization, it'll enable for the fractionalization of these assets further. But also on top of that, with things like real estate, it will enable people to fractionalize real estate for people to own, potentially partial amounts of real estate and a partial amount of those cash flows, which really can create new yield generating assets based off a whole asset class like real estate. So there's going to be a lot of like really cool things that come from these RWAs, and we're seeing a lot of adoption starting to form. Some of the big players like the BlackRocks of the world are really jumping into this space and wanting to be leaders in the issuance of these assets. One of these big challenges around RWAs is the fact that these need to be issued. There's a lot of legals, of regulation and stuff in place to ensure that it's done properly and safely, and the assets are actually legit and properly backed. I'm going to delve into a couple of, protocols in the RWA space that leading the charge and really taking this to the next level. I think we're really in the early stages of RWAs, and we're going to see over the next couple of years like a mass adoption of this, and it's going to really help crypto and blockchain advance. I think we'll see like a lot of benefits brought to like the asset space from these RWAs. And actually one of the conversations we had with the KiiChain team that was really interesting was it's really important to make sure that, some of the issues in the space that people have been like tokenizing assets and just putting them on blockchain and expecting that they're going to have liquidity or people are going to buy them. Whereas KiiChain team talked about, really finding the demand and the supply before really bringing it on chain and going, hey, there's family offices around the world that want to accumulate this asset. There's demand for it in transactions, and there's going to be some volume. So then it makes sense to bring that asset in, and there's going to be a whole market created for this asset rather than just, hey, let's tokenize gold and people are going to buy it. No, there needs to be a reason why people can access it. Like, as we said, Apple in the US might not make sense as people can easily access it. So the demand isn't just there. But maybe in foreign countries, there's a lot of demand for it. So because there's a lot of demand for it, there's a market, and then this can create like a real economy where you've got volume and transaction fees and yield being generated and more. Cool. So I'm going to delve into maybe a couple of leading players in the space, and we'll get through. Before we, obviously kick off properly, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure to subscribe, like and share this video. Subscribing to the channel will really help you to get access to a lot of the educational content and videos we're putting out. We did some videos on Deepin, and we're going to have some more videos around different elements of the space, as well as AMAs, podcast interviews, and product related videos. Definitely worth checking out. Okay, so the main one I'm going to really break down for this video is Ondo Finance. Ondo has just recently announced their own Omni-Chain network for RWAs. They're going to be doing this on the Cosmos SDK, which is really interesting. There's been a bit of not controversy, but people have been talking about how it wasn't mentioned, but it's going to be using the Cosmos tech stack, which is very interesting. So, Ondo Finance has been one of the leading players in RWAs in the space recently as a, from an issuance perspective. They've been working with some big players like Goldman Sachs and BlackRock, which is pretty huge. So the first two assets that Ondo have brought in have been USDY, US dollar treasury yields. So bringing these to obviously the blockchain, which is pretty cool. That can get integrated into DeFi in a pretty cool way. See how it says not available in the US? The cool thing is this means that someone in a foreign country can access US dollar yield. It's basically a stable US dollar asset that generates dollar yield. Then you have US treasuries, which is really cool. They focus a lot on infrastructure to start with, but there's more kind of assets coming. Their goal is to create a really powerful platform for RWA tokenization. So things like, Tesla stocks, NVIDIA, ETFs. It's going to be a whole range of different digital kind of tokenized assets on the blockchain that will create these really cool markets for trading, but also for different things like leverage, like borrowing against these assets on chain, lending out these assets to earn further yield. There's a whole range of different things that can happen. Even if you look at platforms like Pendle, you might have an asset, let's say an asset is generating cash flows. You might be able to strip out the yield and the principal from that asset and create these really cool strategies around some of these TradFi assets. It's going to get really exciting very quickly with the real world asset space. I think even just real estate itself has a huge range of options for RWAs, from the ownership of houses, rental cash flows, commercial real estate, but also Airbnbs and things like that. There's going to be so many different options and ways that this can be leveraged and this yield can be digitalized. Next big one, a main one I'm going to mention is Mantra chain. So Mantra is kind of a leading chain for RWAs, really focusing on applications that tokenize RWAs. Have built a whole range of different modules. So the big one is obviously DEXs for trading RWAs, vaults focused on RWAs, and different modules such as KYC AML, at a chain level that might be needed for some of these things. So there's a lot of like obviously various components that are needed when you're building like an RWA economy. If you delve into like them more, they have like, obviously they've got the swap for RWA swapping, gold token vault, liquidity pools, different vaults, like specified for like trading or for strategies regarding RWA yield. So Mantra's definitely worth checking out. They've been on a tear recently, and they've really like obviously kicking up some steam in the last period of time. If you jump in, you can have a look at their platform and everything going on in this front. The last one I'm going to touch on is KiiChain. We recently had that, obviously the spaces with KiiChain itself, heavily focused on LATAM and emerging markets. The goal of KiiChain is to be like a RWA focused chain in LATAM, or actually more than just RWAs, like just the chain for emerging markets. They already have like a lot of like, I guess, a swap transaction rails for cross-border payments, but also like bringing on a lot of RWAs so that import-export companies can really kind of, access foreign assets, and people in like emerging markets can access RWAs from like the US or a lot of these markets. So these guys are definitely worth checking out. There's gonna be a lot more material come out about these guys. They're working on some stuff behind the scenes. There's a lot more. Obviously RWA protocols, I've only touched on like the surface of it, but this gives you a bit of an idea of, what are RWAs? What is the future of RWAs, and where does it fit into the picture? I'm personally really, really excited about this space. I think this can bring in a whole new age for DeFi, and it's going to enable to create a lot more sustainability. And it means that like DeFi can actually fulfill its promise. I think, vaults specifically that utilize varying real cash flows from the real world can create much more sustainable and real yield sources. And this means that we can access and we can give like everyday people access to like yield and savings that isn't just based off inflationary, crypto assets. So I think that's going to be really, really cool. Again, thanks for watching the video. Look forward to seeing you in the channels. I hope you learned something about RWAs in this video. Make sure to go watch that AMA of KiiChain if you want to go a bit deeper into RWAs, and definitely make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next video.